Good afternoon and welcome to the Let's Talk Mental Health podcast. I'm your host, James Downey.
And I'm your host, Paula Johnston.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by best-selling author, international speaker and survivor, the Courage Cultivator, Madeleine Black. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
No, that's not a problem. And, really inspired by your story and many women out there as well. And it's great to have two women on the podcast as well. And, my new co-host, Paula. Mm-hmm. And we're delighted to have you on, Madeleine. We honestly are. So I'm going to go to my first question. And for the viewers out there, could you give us a wee bit of background on yourself and your mission to inspire others and motivate others?
Yeah, so I went public with my story, my own personal story, about 6 years ago. And it really just opened doors for me. I could never imagine really what was going to take place. So I was invited to do TV and radio shows, invited to speak all over the world. And I recently gave up working as a psychotherapist to put my energy into speaking out more. But obviously COVID came along and has very kindly emptied my diary of any speaking events. So I do a lot of virtual work. But really my mission, I guess, is to speak out by sharing my story to end the shame, stigma and silence that surrounds sexual violence, and to help others find their courage and their voice too, so that they can live their best life.
Yeah, and as we know, stigma is massive surrounding mental health, but not only that, it's massive surrounding, sexual violence as well. So give me your journey to kind of, inspire people and how you're going to do this to, can I end this stigma, Madeleine?
Well, I think that courage is contagious. Somebody else speaking out that helped me to find my voice, and I just really intend to pay that forward. But, I've done many talks. One of them was my TEDx, which I think you've seen in Glasgow last year. And standing on that stage, it was just over 2,000 people. It was one of the scariest moments in my life, but one of the most liberating as well, because the only way I think to tackle shame is to face it. The more we run from it, the more ashamed we are. So by standing there in front of all these people, sharing my story of rape, it was like, well, I don't really care who knows, this is me and this is my story. So standing in my shame, speaking out about it is really what has saved me, without a doubt.
Yeah. And this is really nerve-wracking for me, obviously podcasting, and I'd spoke to Paula about before we come on that, communication issues was really a really big thing for me for many years, And like I say, I'm trying to hit the nail on the head here with doing a podcast and put myself kind of out there. Public speaking's something that I would, find very hard, but, you can always work on yourself, can't you?
Well, you are speaking to the public right now, so you're kind of doing it.
That's true. Yeah, totally. How did you find that? Obviously it must have been nerve-wracking kind of telling your story,
Well, after I shared my story online, it was with the Forgiveness Project in London. I was invited to speak, and I went to my very first event. It was at Festival of Light in Keele University in the chapel. We had a fire alarm went off in the middle. That's how I remember my very first toast. But I sat down and I spoke, and the words just came to me, and I realized that I can do this. I'm not nervous anymore. I'm not ashamed. I've got nothing to be ashamed about. And it feels as if this is a duty. If I can speak out and end the silence, not just for me, but by giving a voice to other people, then this is almost like my purpose now in life. This is my mission, So it's almost, a duty. If I can do this, and I feel I should.
Yeah, and
where was the turning point? We were talking over each other. That's what happens when you've got a co-host.
That's okay. That's all right.
Where was the point, do you think, where you decided to speak about it?
When I first shared it, it was 6 years ago. I was approached by the organization, and they told me that I could be anonymous. I didn't need to put my picture up or my name, but I'm tired of being ashamed for a crime that was committed against my body. It had nothing to do with me. So not saying I wasn't scared, but I did put my picture and my name up, and I've never really looked back since then.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and did you have a lot of people reach out to you, Madeleine? Yeah, through telling your story.
Absolutely. So Marina, who is the founder of the Forgiveness Project, she calls us story healers rather than storytellers, because I'm a storyteller for them as well. And I have felt that healing power of sharing my story, so many times. And I really think that if a person hears a story at the right time in their life, it has the power to transform, and it can light up their map, on their healing journey.
Yeah, and I was speaking to a counsellor, across overseas the other day on LinkedIn, and it's amazing because sex is so in your face now, isn't it? And I think it's really, really bad. And kids are getting this from a young age as well, aren't they? And I mean, how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about we're sexualizing our children? Or
yeah.
I think we need to really go into schools at a very, very young age and talk about consent, and we need to tell them what's a healthy relationship and what's not. And I don't just mean sexual consent. For example, when I was a little girl, you're forced to kiss someone hello, or go and give your grandpa a kiss or your grandma a kiss, not asking you, not giving you a choice. So to show children what it's like to have a healthy relationship, to have respect about consent, is so important, because it was only in the writing of my book, and that was when I was just 49, 50, that I realized I had been raped 3 other times, because I didn't understand consent. I just thought I'd had a lot of bad sex. I became very promiscuous, which was a very normal side effect. There's many ways you can respond to rape, but that is one of them. And I just put it down to that. But when I was writing my book, I thought, I clearly said no, and they just carried on. And even I didn't have any idea of consent. And I worked at Women's Aid for 14 years and Rape Crisis for 6 years. So it came as a shock to me as well that there were these other times I had just totally dismissed.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about mindset quite a lot, Madeleine, and you've had to tap into your mindset over the years, haven't you? To kind of change your way of thinking. How was the process of this? Has it changed your life, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and you're right, it is a process. I don't want anyone sitting here that's maybe had a similar experience to think, well, how did she get to where she's at?
Yeah.
This is a product of decades. It's taken me years and years and years to find my voice and speak and to share it publicly. But it is a process. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
But the gradual changing of mindset, it did kind of come about, I guess, the very end, when I chose to forgive these 2 men. And it's really nothing about them. I didn't really forgive them. I guess I had to start with myself for just being a naive 13-year-old in the wrong place at the wrong time. But forgiveness for me just cut all the ties that linked me to them, that linked me to my past, that linked me to all my negative mind chatter. I was filled with anger and hate and revenge and plotted fantasies against them, that somebody taking them to an empty flat and beating them up, tying them up and raping them and torturing them for 5 hours on end, like they had done to me. But they had no idea of this anger. This anger was only harming me. So I had to find a way to let it go. And forgiveness, it was my choice. But I have to be really clear, and I always say this, I'm not a forgiveness preacher. I don't tell people they have to forgive in order to heal or move on. This really was my path, and that's how I chose to do it. There's many ways to healing, but eventually, I guess forgiveness to me was also, it came under the same time as understanding and total acceptance. Because before I could accept what happened, I was just in denial. When all my memories returned, I didn't want to accept it, because I assumed people would look at me differently. They wouldn't want to know me, that it was a reflection of me in some way. But I had to get to a place where I could totally accept all that was done and realize, I'm not the things that were done to me or my body. I'm so much more than that. I couldn't really trust my mind and all the false stuff that it told me over the years. So I realized that none of us are the events in our life. We're all so much bigger than what happens to us.
And
it's hard for you to meet people dating wise going forward?
No, it wasn't. I met my husband when I was just 17. I was away for a year because my behavior at that time, I was very rebellious, and my parents suggested it would be a good idea to get away. I had been doing a lot of drugs and alcohol, and they sent me away. And at that point, nobody was speaking to me at school, because all my mum had rang all my friends' parents to tell them exactly what we were doing. So obviously I wasn't too popular at that point. When I went to Israel for a year, I met Stephen, a Glaswegian, and we've been together 37 years. But, when I came back to London and now live in Glasgow, I just was shocked that he still wanted to see me, because my opinion of myself was still so low, and I would drive him mad and say, but why do you want to be with someone like me? Because I had no self-worth, no self-respect, no self-confidence. And he just, obviously has stayed around. We're still together and 3 kids later. So, it was unfortunately, because of one of the side effects being very promiscuous, it was very easy for me to attract men, but obviously I didn't attract the right men. But somehow I just knew as soon as I met Stephen that I could trust him. Something in my gut spoke to me, and I felt safe with him, which I'd never felt with other people before, or other men before.
Yeah, I can. Sorry, Paula.
Sorry, Julie, we're doing it all the time now.
I know. But yeah, no, like I was going to say to you, Madeleine, because I can vibe with you on that, because something that I went through was bullying for many, many years, right? And I had all the thoughts in my head, from the people that done that to me, from when I was from the age of 9. So for 20 years, my mindset was very, I'm going to get these guys back. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You're thinking in the unconscious mind, you know what I mean? And like you're not thinking straight. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from on that level, because you do think these things.
Oh yeah, they consumed me for years. These thoughts of revenge, years.
Yeah, absolutely, and myself as well. Paula, what are you going to say there?
I was just going to ask, how did you change the way you felt about your own self-esteem? How did you grow and feel less rubbish about yourself?
Well, it was really working the trauma out of my system. Went for a lot of talking therapy, and then so it got to a point I had done a lot of therapy. I was studying psychotherapy, doing tons of personal development, and I was studying psychotherapy. And I went to the course thinking I'm fine, I'm healed, I'm okay. But, we can convince ourselves of anything, really. And the course is a lot of pressure, and it brings stuff up that you've not dealt with. So obviously, it all came back. So my memories returned when my eldest daughter was 13, which was all about the same time. And at first, like I said, I thought, I didn't believe it. I thought I was going mad. I thought, because I'd worked so long at Women's Aid and Rape Crisis, I thought that I had just picked up other women's stories. This has nothing to do with me. But the more I was denying it, I saw, I'm going to drive myself crazy. I had that power, that potential to really corrupt my own mind and drive it crazy. My thoughts were then worse than the pictures that I was being shown. But every night for months on end, I would get more information. And eventually it was accepting it, that I had to really get to this place, because if I didn't accept it, I would really be crazy. Just the denial was just so huge, and it's holding on just so hard to let go, but eventually I had to surrender and just give in to all of these pictures and images and flashbacks that I were being shown, because you don't get them for nothing. They don't come out of nowhere, so I had to really find a way to accept, and that's really what changed everything.
Yeah. I found forgiveness was my elixir of life, because it took me a lot of years to forgive the people that done that to me, and I can only commend you for that, Madeleine. You seem as if you've came a long way,
Oh yeah, I don't recognise the person I used to be, completely different. But people say that if you don't forgive, or it's like drinking anger and it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to, fall down, but you're really poisoning yourself. The anger was really damaging me and my husband and my kids, which I very nearly didn't have. I very nearly didn't become a mum. So yeah, it was only really damaging me. So I look at the word as forgiving. So it was forgiving me a better chance, really, in my life.
Yeah, I like that, definitely. And, like you say, you touched on self-love and self-care. And it's so important as we're on a mental health platform as well, is to say to people, it's important that you give yourself that self-love and self-care, because whoever's looking in the mirror, that's that's who you are. So learn to love yourself and give yourself that time, because life will fall into place eventually and you can heal. It's important for people to understand that you can heal, So after sharing your story publicly, Madeleine, and opened a lot of doors, as you said earlier on. How was it like to be kind of put into that situation, you know, because you've had a lot of interviews, you've done a lot of TED speaking. What's it like for you? What was it like coming out of that, you know, that healing process, and then being kind of put into that situation?
It's absolutely fine. I have no issue being interviewed. It doesn't cause me any distress or issue. I really, really am okay with everything that happened. Oh, there's my dog. Sorry. Alfie. He often appears on podcasts. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
As I said before, I know what comes when we share our story. So one of the, I guess, a really good interview that I did was for Radio 4 with Sir Trevor McDonald, which was fabulous, obviously. But when after the program was aired, it was what happened afterwards to me was all the evidence I need. My friend's mum was listening. She was 81. And basically she told her that day that she had been raped also as a teenager. And that day she ended 64 years of silence. She'd never spoken out about it, never told anyone. Yeah. And that's the reason I speak out. That's exactly it.
Yeah, totally. No, you've got to, you know, and that's what about. I found it hard for many years to speak out what was going on for me, you know, and I started making a blog, Madeleine, you know, and ever since then it's kind of grew into a podcast now, and I feel easier chatting about what's happened to me in the past now.
Sorry, my dog.
That's okay. That's no problem. It's all right. And yeah, so having you on here and, you know, speaking and especially from a women's point of view, from what you've been through, is amazing. So you won an award in 2018, and it was the Amazing Women's Award. What was it like to, you know, receive an award for all your hard work?
I don't really think I'm amazing. I just think that it was the strength category, and it wasn't for my deadlifting. It was for my emotional strength. But I don't want to be considered brave or anything different. I think we should be able to speak about things that are difficult. You know, we should be able to talk about the good things and the bad things. And this should just be normal that people speak out. So it was lovely to be recognized for what I'm doing. But I don't want to be considered amazing or brave. To me, this is what I can do. So it's really to serve other people. That's why I do it.
Yeah, you're doing yourself a justice there. I think you are amazing, you know, coming on and, you know, being so open. You know, you're such an inspiration to many women out there, and men as well, you know, because if it wasn't for women like yourself, you know, I think the world would be a wee bit of a tougher place for people speaking out.
Thank you.
I really do. And let's touch on your book, because you're a best-selling author. What was it like to kind of put all your experiences down again in paper? What was it like to go through the process? Paul will know about this because she's an author.
It was interesting. Yeah, well, it's about 4 years before I wrote my book. I had been going to I still do see a teacher. I guess you would call him a shaman. And he travels around Europe, and he comes to Glasgow twice a year. And he knew my story, and he said, it'd be really good for you to write your story down. And I said, there's no way. I'm not letting you read it. I'm not letting anyone else read it. Not a chance. And I would stop and start this process. And it literally took me 4 years to write 12 pages. And he said, put all the details down and everything. And then one day, all the words just came, and I just put it all down and I sent it to him. And then it was actually in Glasgow. The Forgiveness Project often run events, but they're normally in London. But there was one in Shawlands Academy, which is like 2 minutes from where I live, at a local school. Mm-hmm. And it was a woman called Marion Partington, whose sister Lucy had been murdered by the serial killers Rose and Fred West. And when she spoke, she just emanated this peace and joy, and it was a story of forgiveness as well. And I just thought, God, maybe I could speak. And then she gave me her book, which I had bought her that night, which is called If You Sit Very Still, which is a beautiful book. And in it, she wrote, now you must speak. And I thought, I think I could do that. And I think I could write my book. And I thought, oh, where did that come from? Where did that all come from?
Yeah.
And the moment I had that thought, literally, the words just came. It was like it was downloaded into my system. And I literally couldn't sleep at night because all these words were flying around my head. And I sat down every morning at my Mac, and the words really flowed out my fingertips. I just felt like I was a typewriter. And in about 8 weeks, I had written 70,000 words. So it was obviously time for the words to come out. But It was good. It was very cathartic to put it all down. And originally, I was really writing it for myself, I think, just to put it onto paper. But then I thought, this is like a book. And I was lucky. I got a publisher about 3 months later. I was published by John Blake, who then bought out by Bonnier, who were brilliant because they put it in every Asda, every airport shop. So it's done well. So it's great.
It's amazing, you know. And Paula, obviously you can relate to that because you're an author, you know.
Not as big as Madeleine, right enough, but I do understand the whole. Your mind is going like a typewriter, and the words just have to get out and be put down on the page. I totally get that. And when you're in the zone, you're in the zone. You can't just shut it off. But I remember being told that writing your thoughts and your feelings down makes it real, and it gets it out of you, and all that bad negative energy that you're keeping in there, to just write it down and get it out there is really helpful for a lot of people. And I think that's quite a good bit of advice to give people, isn't it?
I think it's maybe the stage before you find your voice. If you can't speak out, then tell yourself your story. And if you can't tell yourself, write your story down, because it does, you're right, it shifts something energetically inside. And it was interesting, you know, my friend Joe was my editor. He lives in California, and he'd read what I'd written for Imaho, this teacher that I used to go to see. And he said, "You are going to put the details in." And I said, "No way, I'm not letting people read exactly what happened to me," because I was still so ashamed. I thought, oh, they would be disgusted, and I couldn't bear the idea of people knowing my most intimate secrets. And then my publishers got my book, you know, they gave me a contract, and then they said, you know, I don't think we should be putting all the details in. It's quite a lot of people to read. But at that point I thought, no, if I'm going to share my story, I'm not going to dilute it for people. I'm not going to make it comfortable to read, you know, because we should be disturbed. There are disturbing things that take place. And so they agreed to put that chapter in, but that chapter now comes with a warning to say that, you know, if you read beyond this, blah, 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 there will be more details of what took that place. I think it's called All of One Night. And I'm pleased that I did that now, because I wouldn't want to write that part again. But it's just to really show people what can take place. My friend Joe said that as a man, he just thought being raped was just being overpowered, and that was it. I mean, my case was very violent, but it's not about comparison, because all rape is a violation, whether it's violent or not. It's a violation of our mind, our body, and our psyche. But he said, as a man, it educated me. You really need to put all the details in. So he worked me, and then I thought, yeah, he's right. I shouldn't keep quiet about actually what took place. I should really just put it all down. So it was very weird when it first went out. People know the most intimate details of my life, but it's as if it happened to someone else. Doesn't belong to me anymore. So my story is out there, and people can do with it what they like, I suppose.
You've put your emotions on page. It's just went out of you onto paper, and it's like a release, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, it was good to put it down. And the book opened doors as well. You know, I've been invited to speak just by people that have read the book. I went to speak in Johannesburg, and I said, "But you've never heard me speak." He said, "But I read your book." I went, "Okay, wow. If you think that's okay." So it was great. I went to Johannesburg.
Fantastic. And it's amazing how such an inspirational words, in your case, can make you go on to, you know, write a book, and words start falling out of the sky, and you know, it's tremendous. And you know, I'd always been thinking about writing a book, but I don't know yet. And I've got Paula helps me with a lot of things, so she's been great, you know, with regards to that. So can we speak about your podcast? You've got a new podcast called Unbroken, which is healing through storytelling, and you've spoken to, you know, your friend Colin Jackson, and you've a numerous amount of guests on. Can we speak a wee bit about that, who you've had on? And
as I said in the beginning, my diary was emptied. In fact, my wall planner fell off the wall today, and I thought that's a bit of a statement, really, isn't it? It's a bit of just hanging around and not having anything written on it. So in the beginning, I struggled with the lockdown. I really struggled, and I thought I'm meant to be a motivational speaker, and I'd lost my mojo. I was so miserable because I thought I'd given up being a psychotherapist. I was traveling the world. I'd just come back from Namibia, where I was the closing speaker at a big, there's a dog again, at a big festival, a big conference. And I thought, what am I going to do now? You know, where am I? So after a while, the idea again literally fell into my head, do a podcast show, because I have access to so many people, you know, through the Forgiveness Project. I'm also a recipient or in a project called the Global Resilience Project, which is really where she researches people that she has 50 Thrivers, a woman called Emma Bell, and she's looking at why we thrive after adversity. So I know tons of really interesting people, and I really believe in the power of sharing stories. So I decided to start a podcast show. I've now recorded 40 episodes, which is quite a lot. We have released number 17 today. In the beginning, I released the first 10, and now I'm just going to do one a week. I did 2 a week, but it's too much. So we do one a week. And they're all stories of people that have really been through tough times. They've triumphed after adversity or tragedy, and they've not just bounced back, they've bounced forward in life. And really people that are making the difference for other people. I just believe that, stories can be healing, and I wanted to inspire people, motivate them, and really bring hope. And Collins was obviously interesting because he is my most famous pal, obviously. And he had just made a program for Panorama. I don't know if you saw it. It was about eating disorders amongst elite athletes. And I said to him, it'd be really good to explore your own journey, because he spoke a little bit about when he was bulimic and anorexic. And this was at the time he was winning gold medals as an Olympic hurdler, and he was eating like 700-800 calories a day. And how could you win gold medals, not just running, but jumping over hurdles at the same time?
You need some amount of fuel for that, It's like...
I could eat that in a snack, That's just one snack. A Mars bar would be more than that, It was shocking. And then it was really sad, because I said, what difference would it have made now if you'd had a really good diet? He said, I would have been happy. He was miserable, even though he's winning. He's at top of his game. He's winning all these medals. And that was really sad to hear. But he said it affected him in other ways. He didn't sleep. He was very grumpy. He was very defensive. If anybody said, you think you're not eating right, he would just tear them to shreds. And who's going to argue with an Olympic gold medalist?
That's true.
So it was very interesting. And his body image as well. He spoke about, even in his flat in Wales when he's by himself, he wouldn't even take his top off because he's so self-conscious of his body.
Yeah.
It sounds very odd.
Did he have like body dysmorphia, Madeleine? Was that like...
And I said, what was that about? And he said he would just compare himself to other people. When he first started, he said that he was a podgy teenager, which he never was. He was never podgy. And the guys he was training with were mid-20s, so they were all ripped and they had, big athletic bodies, and he never felt he had that. But I meet him every winter on a holiday. It sounds very strange. I have seen his body. There's nothing wrong with his body. Nothing at all. So that was very interesting. But all the stories are all just fascinating.
Phenomenal. Yeah, they're really good podcasts. And for anybody out there, for viewers and listeners, get onto Madeleine's podcast. I think a lot of you will resonate with them. I certainly do. And the story you told there of body dysmorphia, I had that. I was a bodybuilder for a number of years.
Yeah, I remember you told me. That's why I thought you'd like that one. That episode.
And I was huge at one point, and I've come down, and I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I could never. But see, now I'm so happy because I give myself the self-love and the self-care. I'm able to do that now, and it's fantastic. But you were touching on, he always had a great physique. Anytime that I'd seen him, he always had a great physique. So it's amazing how, you think athletes don't suffer from that, but they certainly do.
Well, the program was really specifically elite athletes, and now he's training for Dancing on Ice, which will be out. I think he's on TV January the 15th. And I said, well, what about now? Are you still self-conscious? And he said he is now. He still does worry what he looks like on TV, but he'll work with a nutritionist. So he's doing it very sensibly now. So.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, how do you keep fit? Keep your mind?
Yes, I love to exercise, because a lot of my journey that night when I was gang raped when I was 13, I left my body. I wasn't present that night, and then it was an out-of-body experience, which is really what saved me. I think I would have died otherwise, but I never felt back in. And that lasted for years. I was like a house that had no furniture inside, just this empty shell. So my journey has really been about getting my memories back, even though once I got them, I didn't like them. But it's also been about getting back into my body. So I've used sport in a lot of ways. So 41, I went to my first karate class. I still go.
Do you still go, yeah?
Yes, 55 black belt, still there.
Oh, wow, black.
I am a weightlifter as well, because, as you know, you can't deadlift twice your body weight unless you're in your heels, in your calves, in your core, will know me from the gym anyway. I do yoga as well. I'm a windsurfer. I walk every day. So yeah, for me to be physical really lands me back in my body, if that makes sense. I used to run actually a lot. I ran every day of my life, and people in Glasgow say, oh, they always beat the car and they always wave to me and, oh, you're still running. But I gave up running because I realized one day, I mean, I was a marathon runner. I only done one marathon, but I trained a lot, and I could run forever, which was great. But I wasn't connected in. I wasn't in my body, and I used to tell myself I'm really free. I could go for hours, but it's because I wasn't connected in. I could go for hours, which was great for my one and only marathon. But I realized that I just wasn't in at all. I was just running on empty. Wasn't really connecting in. So for me to do other kind of sports really helped, to get
karate was something that obviously connected with you. I mean, I love combat sports. I'm really into MMA. I've done Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I know.
I've just finished watching Kingdom on Netflix. Oh my god, it's vicious.
It's brilliant as well. Frank Grillo is in that, isn't he? He's a really good actor.
The Jonas Brothers,
Jonas Brothers as well, yeah. But I mean, it's something that I connected with. I trained with a champion, and he's a big inspiration to me, John Jameson. If you're watching, hello, how are you? And combat sports was something I connected with later on in life, but it made a hell of a difference for me. Like forgiveness as well. It helped me forgive in a way, because having the capability to fight's a great thing, but the discipline that comes along with it is what makes it, and a lot of people think, it's vicious. Obviously, it is vicious and it's quite violent, but the discipline that goes along with any type of combat sport or any type of martial arts is phenomenal, and you'll know that yourself, being a black belt. I mean, I wouldn't like to get in a fight with you.
Well, what, people are impressed by black belt, but actually it's just a white belt that never gave up. And once I got my first dan, I just thought, I'm just starting now. I was in kindergarten before, now I've just started school. So it's a huge journey. So one of my interviewees, which has not been published yet, is a man called Jeff Thompson, who at one point was considered the most influential martial artist next to Bruce Lee. So he's an 8th dan. He's incredible. He's also written about 50 books. He's a film writer. He's a playwright. But he was really interesting,
fantastic
to speak to.
Amazing.
Fascinating, really fascinating. His journey with martial arts. He's also in judo and in boxing. So every kind of martial arts he excelled in. But fascinating journey he had with fighting.
How do you fit? I mean, did you watch Cobra Kai? Do you like? I quite like the. I'm a massive fan of the Karate Kid. Like, I love Cobra Kai and all that. It's brilliant. If you're into karate, Madeleine, you'll probably.
Okay, I haven't watched that. Add it to my list.
It's such a great.
After Kingdom, I have to watch something a bit lighter. That was a bit.
I think Karate Kid's a wee bit lighter than that.
It was so intense. Oh.
Definitely. So can we go on to, because obviously you spoke about the Global Resilience Project. Can you kind of tell us a wee bit more about that, please?
So through LinkedIn, I was contacted by Emma Bell, who's a former judge. She's a coach. She's an author. She's an amazing woman. And she asked me to be a guest on her podcast, which is called The Inside Shift. So I really like the word, because it's never an external job. Sometimes we think if we got a better car, a different boyfriend, a better job, I'd feel happier. But actually, at the end of the day, always it's an inside job. It's always what we do internally in our internal world rather than our external world. So I loved her title. And then she just told me, she's going to do this book, or she's doing this research, and she's taken 50 people, 50 thrivers. We've all had very different stories, but we all are in some way thriving after what happened to us. And I guess it's kind of like post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress. We've all grown from our experience.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, I would never really undo what happened to me. I wouldn't wish it on anyone else, but I don't think I would be the person I am now without it. It showed me my strength and my resilience, but that strength and resilience is within all of us. So she basically has come up with 9 tips that all of her 50 thrivers do, and her book, surprise, surprise, is called 9 Tips or 9 Secrets to Thriving. And I recorded my chapter in a cupboard during lockdown for Audible, because I recorded in my little windowless box here, this little office, and they said it was too echoey. So they said, go into a room or a cupboard, put pillows and duvets. So I literally sat in the cupboard and did my chapter. But yeah, so now it's available on audio. It might be a book eventually. And I was fascinated. I wanted to know, well, what do I do? Or what have I done? She said, we all do some of the tips, but we don't all do all 9. But there's common threads, what we all do. So I think gratitude, it sounds very odd, but these 2 young men taught me that to be grateful, because they made really 3 attempts to kill me, which obviously they didn't succeed. But I thought, I've got my life. I'm going to live my life. So many women and men are raped and then killed and tossed aside somewhere. And I'm just so grateful for my life that I'm going to live my life as best as I possibly can. I didn't say that for a long time, but that's where I got to now. So gratitude, to really focus on what I have rather than what I don't have, that really helps me every day.
Totally. And gratitude's something that I do every morning. And I said to Paula before we started, and on my door, I've got, I believe in manifesting and everything else, but I once heard a quote that, what we think about and think about, we bring about. So it's such an amazing quote for me. And every morning I wake up and thankful for the life that I have. As many years ago, I wouldn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, has he disappeared?
I think he has, so you're stuck with me. What I was going to ask you was, have you actually spoken to a lot of males that have gone through like a similar sort of ordeal as yourself?
Obviously, when I worked as a psychotherapist, I had male and female clients, and there's no difference. One of a client that I actually write about in my book, it just really amazed me when I was working his issues with him, the way he responded and thought and felt. He was just like a woman, it really shocked me, but he really taught me a lot. They used to say at my college that the clients you get are a gift, and he really was my gift, because he showed me that, because I was still very scared of men at that point, I had to sit nearest the door in a session so I could get out first in case they attacked me. I was filled with fear. But then I said to the receptionist, listen, just give me male clients. I had to really crack this fear, because I couldn't not only work with women, I had to work with men as well. But he showed me, by the way he responded and the work that we were doing about his own rape, it's not that he thought like a woman, he thought like a human being. And that really, really helped me. Men and women respond in the same way. He felt contaminated and dirty. He also scrubbed his body many times a day, changed his underwear just like I did. And it really helped me. Hopefully I helped him as well as a therapist. But yeah, it was amazing to make that discovery. Gosh, I had thoughts
as well, that we acknowledge that it isn't just women, it is men that it happens to as well, because maybe men, not saying it's an easy thing to come forward with regardless of your gender, but I think men are also a wee bit proud and wouldn't open up.
I wouldn't say it's more difficult or harder for men. I think it's more difficult for women, because when men do come out, they're not faced with victim blaming. They're not faced with all the rape myths. They're not faced with, well, what were you wearing? You were wearing jeans, and what were you drinking? They don't have any of that. So for women, it's a big risk to come out, because even at 13, I knew I would get into trouble because I'd been drinking. I'd stayed in an empty flat. I'd lied to my mum and dad. I really don't think men face that, but they experience exactly the same emotions. Most men that I know that have come out and spoke about it, they have been supported, but pride is hard for either gender, And it's not really pride. I think it's shame. And the more men or the more women that speak out, that's the only way we end that shame.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't have put it any better myself, Madeleine, So what's your future plans? If we get anything we can get excited about? I mean,
I never really like to plan anything. I have been asked to do another TEDx, which I think takes place in March. They did want to do it in person, but I don't know if that's going to happen. It's TEDx University of Glasgow. And the theme this year is distortion. So I haven't quite worked out my talk yet, which I need to get my act together. But I'm thinking along the lines of the distortion that shame brings and guilt brings and fear brings, all of those stuff, and how we break out of it.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
The power of sharing stories, really, I want to really bring that in as well.
And that's all. It's all about healing, isn't it? This is healing for me. It's been amazing to have this podcast and speak to people like yourself. I feel really grateful that you've come on and sharing your story. I really do. And, you're such, like I said earlier on, don't do yourself any injustice. You're such an inspirational person, to someone like myself who's went through trauma as well. And, again, grateful. We keep talking about this. I feel very grateful that I've got this platform and I'm able to have, a co-host like Paula, she's an author, and yourself, who's a best-selling author, an international speaker, and an amazing woman. Absolutely amazing woman. Can I ask you a final question? What was it like to be interviewed by Trevor McDonald? Because that must have been something
pretty cool. I'm a bit older than you too, so I grew up with Tiswas, and Lenny Henry used to call him Sir Trevor McDonald. And then he would come on the show with these great big city glasses, and I said to him, I remember you, as Trevor McDonald. He said, oh, you're far too young to remember me as Trevor McDonald. But he was, as you imagine him to be. So I was waiting in the BBC studio, and they went over the road to the hotel to bring him in. And, he just had time for everyone. We walked down the corridors to the sound studio. Hi, Sir Trevor McDonald, hello. And he stopped, he shook everybody's hand. He was so polite. And when we got to the studio, the sound guy said, well, who's interviewing who? They thought I was maybe interviewing him. He said, no, I have the pleasure of interviewing him. And it looked in the beginning, he was faffing with all his papers, and I thought, I don't know if he knows what he's doing. And then the moment he started, Madeleine Black, and I was like, oh shit. He was so there, he was so present. It was, obviously a fantastic experience to have met him.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be on his level one day. We'll see what happens. I still get nervous doing this, but it is what it is. If only, we'll see. But no, Madeleine, honestly, it's been a pleasure having you on, and again, sharing your time with us, talking about this, this topic, and breaking the stigma. Such an amazing podcast.
I do have one piece of news, actually. I forgot. As of yesterday, I'm now an ambassador for an organisation called Freedom from Abuse, which people should look up because they do really important work. It's about educating and training people about sexual abuse and grooming. And I'm also a patron in Scotland for Say Women, which is helps young women that are homeless due to sexual abuse as well, which is another fantastic organisation. And one more, a patron for Justice Is Now, which is about challenging all the rape myths and the victim blaming that goes on within the judicial service. So it goes on amongst the judges and the lawyers, basically. So all such important organisations, and I'm really honoured to be representing all of them.
You're doing amazing things. No, well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, you are. You're such an inspiration. I keep saying that, but you so are. To women out there, and if anybody's listening, and you're going to view this later, you're going to listen in later, where can we find you, Madeleine?
You can go to my website, madelineblack.co.uk, but if you search, I'm on all the social media platforms. And if you want to listen to my new show, which is only actually 5 weeks old today, it is Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black, and it's on all the channels, also on my YouTube channel. And just really one final word that I would say, if anyone is listening and they are struggling, it's never too late to find your voice. Find someone to share your story with. Maya Angelou says there's no greater agony than a story that's untold. Just find someone to share your story with. And if you can't find someone, as Paula said, tell yourself, write your story down. Don't be like my friend's mum, who very nearly took her story to the grave with her.
Yeah, and what a great way to finish, And all that's left for me to say is we've been Let's Talk Mental Health, and thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon. God bless.
Bye.
Thank you.